Mine said something about that too, like if they did 1 year, or they got bad, then maybe it's just bad years after that.
It promotes teacher collaboration between low-performing teachers and high-performing teachers. Because if you have teachers in your school who are based on their students' evaluations, then that's
You know, mine basically talked about us really hard to get that meaningful data to test. And that standards change around so much, it's hard for me to like compare data.
Yeah,
When you use like
it's
sports
wordy,
data, you
and
can use that
it's-
for teachers.
Okay, so,
still
identifying those.
in the 8 o'clock.
If we ask what
30 seconds. So I was kind of listening, something you guys have Looks like everybody is about at that place, so
I
I'm,
think maybe BAM is clear, test, evaluating
I have
teachers.
placed the rubric at your table. It's at the top there, there's just 2 copies, just so you can see it on each side. You have a rubric in front of you for jotting down your thoughts about how the debate is going. So for example, on your sheet, if you have effective arguments based on teacher impact with some space, and then student impact, use of specific examples and overall team behavior. So you've got the affirmative side, the negative side. So you're supposed to be jotting down information that folks are commenting on, so that you can get a sense of, oh, that was a really good argument, but it's also something you need to know, right? So it's for, one objective is to see, well, which side presented the best case, but ultimately it's the learning, right? What are the positives and the negatives, and learning the, and the impacts on teachers and students. So any questions before we begin? So you remember the order, we have the affirmative A, 30 seconds, and then the rebuttal, this is negative A, and I think probably what I should have printed was the order. And then affirmative B, negative B, and then it's gonna basically flip-flop, so then they get to have the closing statement. All right, you ready? I'm gonna get my timer to give you 30 seconds. And make sure you have identified your first speaker for each group. I'm gonna stand here.
So can only one person in the group talk in that 30 seconds?
Yes, only one person in that group can talk for 30 seconds. And after the first round, I'm gonna be watching time, and we may do a second round so that the second person talks, and then the closing will be the final person. All right? Okay. So affirmative A, if you all will stand your speaker. And when you begin speaking, I'll start the timer.
Okay, so we are teachers oriented for testing scores because, for one thing, it promotes teacher growth because it gives info for teachers to tailor their plans for the future. So if they know that they have a weakness in a lot of their test scores, then they can plan for the future and how to better prepare for those subject areas. It promotes mentorship between teachers. If you're a low-performing teacher, you might be encouraged to seek out a teacher in your school who consistently scores high.
Okay,
and-
stop.
Oh,
Okay, you have
but that's 30 seconds.
30
Oh
seconds.
my gosh.
Yep. Okay.
Cool.
So you all should have been taking a few notes on what she indicated. So she talked about identifying weaknesses within content knowledge. If I'm going to sort of summarize that for you, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong. Teachers can identify, because of the test scores, they can identify areas that they need to improve on and work harder on for their students. And she also talked about teacher collaboration, teachers collaborating. You got high-performing teachers, low-performing teachers. If we're all held accountable for test scores, we can work together to improve. Okay? Reset, rebuttal, who's the speaker? When you start speaking, I will.
We're the rebuttal, y'all know that. So, not just teachers affect students, so I don't think that we should be held accountable. So, there's a lot of things that affect students, like class size, curriculum, materials, instructional time, availability of tutors, resources for learning, home and community supports, individual student needs, health or abilities, peer culture, prior teachers or schools, summer learning loss, and the specific test itself, which might emphasize some learning and not other learning.
Time's up. Okay, so a quick summary. She listed a whole lot of things that are out of teachers and schools, well, teachers' control in particular. She talked about curriculum, she talked about class size. Yeah, you threw out a few others in there that you talked about.
The test itself.
The test itself is
needs,
big, yeah.
Home supports.
Yeah, home environment. And it's assuming that the test is measuring what we want it to measure. That's a big assumption. Okay, so that's from the teacher perspective. And now the student affirmative perspective, who's the speaker there? Okay, when you start talking, I'll set the timer.
So the whole purpose of the education system is for the benefit of the students. The purpose of evaluating teachers based on student performance is because it creates an accountability system that improves the quality of the education the students are receiving. If a teacher is not doing well, the evaluation shows where they need to improve. If they are doing good, it shows them where they can be great. The teacher impact is the greatest on, has the greatest impact on students than any other factor in a school system.
Stop. Okay, so the last thing that she said was that the teacher has the greatest effect on student learning. That's the biggest effect. And that the school is the, there should be an accountability so that we know that our teachers are doing what they're supposed to do to help students grow. Was there another point in there that I missed that you wanted to?
It was just the whole purpose of an education system is for the benefit of students.
All right. And the rebuttal?
As previously stated, there are a lot of outside factors that can affect how students achieve in school, and because of these things, teachers are disincentivized to go to these schools where the students are most needy, which can include students that are minorities or disabled or low income, and because their test scores are likely to be lower because of things teachers can't control, teachers are going to avoid these places because they know that they are going to be evaluated based on student performance.
So there's a disincentivization for teachers to go to schools where there are students that have high needs, because they know that those scores are going to reflect on them. And again, things that are out of the control of those being evaluated. Okay, so we're gonna do another round, again, starting with affirmative A to B to A to B. So decide who your second speaker is. And remember, we're not reiterating, we're building on what we've already talked about. So we're not just repeating, we're adding to the conversation or to the debate. So you should have 4 squares filled in at this point, or 3 if you're not counting yourself, since you already have that information.
So for the second round, are we doing it this down here?
Yeah, you can use that second row there.
Oh, this.
And also,
That's what that was for.
TLOS is about growth and improvement, so that sort of makes the.
I like grades.
It's a way of organizing, and for a summary, there should have been a 3rd spot in there, but we'll do our best.
In my lessons, I like to use
It helps people,
grid-based worksheets.
it helps people to organize their thinking. Those graphical organizers are really, really helpful for some people.
I like the grids. I
Yeah,
noticed that on your last one.
I
Yeah.
like grids.
Okay, are we ready for our
Yes.
next argument? When you are ready, if the speaker will stand, I'll start when the speaker speaks.
All right, so TVOS, which is what we read about, measures student growth as opposed to just a score. So I think with regard to low-performing students, that sort of takes out the extra curricular factors, and it incentivizes standardized teaching so that teachers will teach the same thing from place to place better, and if the test is good, then teaching for the test is also effective, and it helps keep track of the progress of the whole
Stop.
district.
Okay, good. So they brought up TVAS, or TVAS, how you choose to say that, and Keith said that that is a measure of growth. It's not just a measure of achievement, but it's a measure of growth. And incentivizing teachers to be, he used the word standardized teaching, and I'll just sort of add to sort of maybe clarify that if Jace is a teacher of music and I'm a teacher of music, and Jace is a way better teacher than I am in music, and so I might be doing something that is completely different or not as much as, so her students are getting more than my students, and that's not fair to students, right? So that the notion that we're going to teach, this, we're going to learn from each other and teach more similarly. Is that the message you're talking about, that standardized teaching? Okay. All right. And the rebuttal?
Okay, so the way that these tests are created is not very accurate in the way it affects the student. So in that way, teachers are labeled effective and ineffective incorrectly. For example, there was a study done that 20% of the teachers that were in the top tier, a third went lower, a third stayed, and a third actually went down to 40%. So these tests are not always accurate in affecting student or teacher growth.
Okay. So the tests are not accurate in what they measure, and there's a study that she referenced where was it teacher evaluation scores that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Some a third stayed, most of them did some dropping rather than going up.
Mm-hmm. But not because they were ineffective, but because of just how.
The way the test scores were,
Like
yeah.
I say, outside factors.
Yeah. There's this whole thing called the widget effect, where that sort of, one of the things that spurred this on, it was a big study that was done that showed that teacher evaluation scores and teacher and student test scores, they did not correlate well. So if you had most teachers were getting really, really high scores for evaluations, even those that maybe weren't doing such a great job, and that the test scores were not reflective of great teaching that was being assessed. Okay, and so we will now go with affirmative B for student, or teacher, I'm sorry? Student, just kidding, student.
Oh,
Yeah.
So evaluating teachers based on their students' achievement requires teachers to set goals for student academic growth, not just retention rates. So we're not looking at for students to meet a certain level, but to see how much they've learned, not just what they've learned. And it also promotes the growth and the quality of the teacher, because they can address the different needs of the students instead of just trying to get their students to meet a certain score.
Okay. No, you can keep going.
Oh, and also, it is a subjective way to rate teachers based on their students' achievement instead of the subjective evaluation.
So you said it was an objective way to measure, or subjective way?
Objective.
Objective. So the affirmative student, it's an objective rather than a subjective way to evaluate, looking at growth, not just achievement. And what was the second point you made after the growth part?
Teacher quality. Yeah, quality of the teacher's growth, not just students' growth.
Quality of teacher growth.
Which in turn.
Yes, goes back to the students. So we're able to identify more accurately what teachers do well and what they don't do well, and giving them plans for improvement and that sort of thing. Okay, and now we will have the rebuttal for student.
Okay, so it could bring less qualified teachers into classrooms because if you're in a high needs area, teachers may not want to go to the high needs area. So it could take teachers that were in a different school area with poor scores into those high needs areas. And students may not have a positive learning environment because of the high stakes. So if teachers are stressed out about the test scores, then there could be more high stakes and the environment would be affected by that. Students who have high needs or do not test.
All right, so, teachers being stressed, having, my words aren't coming to me, a less learning environment, help me with my word, a less effective learning environment is what you indicated, right?
Yes.
All right. So there's going to be a summary round, and in the summary round, the negatives speak first, and the positives have the last say. So I'll give you a moment to get your thoughts together for the last person based on everything that was argued. You're going to make a final point. You're certainly allowed to bring in new points. You may want to emphasize very strongly very specific points that were already stated. That's up to you. So I'll give you a moment to confer.
Ready to summarize?
I have no idea what we're talking about. I have no idea.
Do we have more time?
Alright, so let's do some quick review. Our summary is that evaluating teachers based on student scores is bad for students. And our reasons for that are that there are outside influences that can affect how students score, and because of that, teachers are going to avoid certain types of students, like students of color and poor students. Teachers are going to avoid those because those students are likely to achieve less because of things outside of the school's control. Along with that, teachers are too stressed out about the test scores, so they're going to avoid non-tested areas like music and arts, which is not good for the development of the children. And because of that, we'll have a negative learning environment, which is going to stress out the kids. And that's not going to help them score any better, so these schools are going to lose funding, and the good teachers are going to leave, leaving even more needy students without teachers.
Okay, you ready, or do we need another minute? Ready? All right. Finish this little thing right here on this side. I'll give you the yours in a moment, and we'll finish up our final round. So you may or may not have space to write in your final round, but where you write is up to you. Okay? So we'll start with negative A first, please.
Well, as we talked about, a lot of factors, like the majority of factors that impact student learning are outside of teachers' control. And the data we use to measure teachers and the standardized tests often aren't very good at measuring student learning. And standards change so much year to year, it's hard to have comparable data to compare a teacher's growth the previous year to the next year, because if they redid the entire system of standards and learning different content, that could make it hard to grow. A good alternative would be, in
Stop.
addition, no?
Sorry. Okay, very quickly, what was your last point?
An alternative would be more kind of observation videotape, student surveys, and student work.
Good, that's an important piece to bring out. I wanted to make sure that you got that. Some good alternatives to current practice. Okay, and, okay.
Alright. With these teacher evaluations, it does help distribute the quality teachers throughout the district, especially in the areas of the high needs. And also, whenever the teachers are performing low, they are observed by the school at least 4 times a year. They are observed more often than the higher evaluated scores.
Okay. Okay, so the point being that, the last point being that teachers that are struggling theoretically are getting more help because they're being evaluated more, they're getting more feedback. Back in the day, that was not the case. After you got tenure, you wouldn't see an administrator in your room ever. And when you were being evaluated, it was, for a lot of people, just a dog and pony show. And then teachers went back to doing whatever they were doing, good, better, the ugly, you know. So, that's a good point. Okay, negative, student.
The tests aren't good for students because they can they can involve outside factors outside of the classroom. The students can be involved in stuff outside of the classroom. They can affect their test scores, and that's not the liability of the teacher to have to worry about that. And also, teachers will stay away from schools with high needs and students that have higher needs just to get the test scores. And also, they'll stay away from subject areas that aren't tested, which won't give a student a complete, well-rounded education.
All right. So again, these factors that are out of the teacher's control, and the students that are suffering from having maybe better teachers, teachers that are like yourself, novices going in, you want a job wherever you can get it. And Madison, if you don't mind, I'll share. Madison's husband teaches at Metro. He's a new teacher. He's at a pretty tough school. He's got 3 preps.
He did, yeah, his first year.
His first year, and one of them was in a subject area that he doesn't even have a certification in, or maybe.
That they threw on him like after he was hired.
Yeah, it's like, oh, by the way, do this, and so, lots of times that happens. You don't get the luxury of many folks, anyway, many teachers, of just teaching one thing. You might be teaching something, and there are laws against that. There's waivers that you can get, but really there's laws against that now. That did not used to be the case. There were people teaching content that they had no content background in, which is negligence. Okay?
Yes,
Yes,
it is.
yes, absolutely. Okay, and now affirmative B.
Okay, so bringing it back around, we said that the sole purpose of education is for the benefit of the student. So we need like accountability and great quality in teachers because they have the greatest impact on the student. So by having those test scores affect the teachers, would keep them accountable and make them want to improve their teaching methods to help the student for
Stop.
their education.
All right, so basically by having test scores, it does make teachers accountable, and they're more likely, if I'm interpreting what you're saying properly, to do better. You know, if somebody's watching you, human nature, we tend to do better than if we're not being watched or monitored. So don't take these now, I'm just setting them there. A little behind schedule, but that's sort of the nature of things. So who do you think won? Anybody have any ideas? Okay, Jason thinks our side won. Anybody agree, disagree? Agree? Agree?
I think we will.
Okay, all right, so we don't have enough time really to go through what and why and all of that. But basically, you may be on this side and you agree with that side, and you may be sitting on that side and you agree with this side, but you both have been given some very important information for arguments. The articles that you use to make your arguments, if you'll sort of stack them sort of this way again, you know, I had them stacked like this, and put them on the right side of your, did I have them on the right side?
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
Sorry, that's one. What needs to stay again? So 1, 2.
That stays, that's all the stuff you keep.
That's what we keep.
Which one are we keeping?
Yeah.
You keep the achievement.
So I guess your articles were all on the left side, not on the right side. You're keeping the articles that are on the right.
This one.
I know.
So,
I don't know.
it's the one that has TVOS, and it has achievement, and it has growth. These are the ones you keep, right here. And then these are the ones that you're gonna make, sort of stacks like this, or, yeah.
So we're giving them that.
Yes, we're giving that one back. This one's yours. Yeah. Are you keeping that one as well?
Okay, what are,
You're keeping this one as well too.
Oh, wait, I have this.
Howard, give me one factor that impacts, or that is used to evaluate teachers. One factor.
Well,
There are 3 that are in that high thing that we were looking at. Do you remember? So what's one?
student growth data.
Student growth data. And what is student growth data measured with? What is that called?
value-added measures.
TVOS.
Oh,
So, growth is with TVOS, and Madison, Arnold, give me, another factor.
Observations.
Observation, that's that qualitative portion there, and then, sorry, give me a third one.
Isn't that what they said, the, like, student achievement stuff?
He said growth.
He said growth, which is, this portion here.
The
So,
student achievement.
Achievement, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an achievement, and then there's a growth, which is talked about as student data, is that what it's called there? Student growth data. So student growth data, there's achievement, and then there's the observation, or that qualitative portion. So 2 impacts from the system on teachers. So you guys did students, give me an impact on a teacher, positive or negative? Give me a positive on teacher.
Teachers are given information about what they need to improve on.
Given information on what they need to improve on, very specific. Give me a negative on teachers.
That there are a lot of other factors to consider, other than just what's happening currently in the classroom.
The factors that are out of their control, that they don't, that they can't, they can't control. All right, give me a, positive for students.
They hold the teachers accountable.
Okay, so how is that gonna impact students?
Make sure that the teachers are being good teachers, I mean,
If you've got good teachers, chances are you're gonna have some good learning going on.
Right.
All right, give me a negative for the, students.
The tests might not always accurately measure growth.
Sure. It may not be an accurate measure. Okay, you have an assessment there, just take a minute to complete that. I would like you to complete it without looking at your handouts. So, if you'll complete your, assessment, then the homework assignment is on the second page, so I keep the first page, you keep the second page. Today is the 3rd. Make sure you put your name on that. You get to keep your rubric. Oh, that's your thing, I'm sorry. Did you get the,
Did we keep something accidentally?
well, I'm wondering if I put it out. Did you get the report? Oh, it's because I didn't give you guys these, okay. You did good.
Did good with the information that we
Yes,
had.
you did, sorry about that. You guys have, did you guys have this?
Those were.
That was it,
Yes.
okay, so I just didn't share well here. You have this one. And as you finish, I'll take those and you're free to go, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.